It always struck me as a little weird that some of the guests wear masks. Now, there's a lot of mask imagery already on the Maw, notably the chefs, the lady, the shadow kids. Some even think Roger's wearing a mask due to there not being any eye holes where his eyes should be, where his skin's peeled over his face. But why are the guests wearing masks? They don't have any reason to, and why are only some of them wearing masks? It didn't make sense to me until The Sounds of Nightmares came out, specifically episode 2, where we learn about these characters called the Bathers. They're described as these bloated, dirty people exiting off of giant fish-like contraptions, all wearing wooden masks. I believe this connection explains why the guests wear masks, how the Maw works, and gives us some more insight onto the actual world of Little Nightmares. But first, let me introduce myself. Hello, welcome to the Overman channel where I discuss Little Nightmares theories and make Little Nightmares content. Recently, I put out my Sounds of Nightmares animation, which, if you haven't seen it, you should definitely go watch it. I animated the entire first episode of The Sounds of Nightmares, and I plan on animating the whole series. I've already gotten a lot of support for the first video, and I do want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I can't visualize like 20 people all in a room together, let alone 100, let alone 1,000, let alone 12,000, which is what it's at the time of recording this, and that's just mind-boggling to me. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all the support. I've already started work on preparing for the second episode. Noon got a little bit of a redesign during the filming of the first episode. All 4 of her limbs broke off, which, wasn't good. I did repair them, but they're very shoddy and would not work for the next 6 episodes. So I redesigned her, put her in a little hospital gown. I bought a Nendroid figure and I use that as the body so she has more flexibility, which is better for the more action-packed scenes. I'm preparing the guests, or the Bathers, as we'll get to, and I'm preparing some of the cities, some of the buildings. I'll show some pictures on screen now, but it might take a while before this one comes out. It might take less time, it might take less than a year if I focus really hard, but yeah, that's in the works. Keep an eye out. Now on to the theory. The guests are strange. They all kind of look the same, except for the distinction. Some wear masks. That was always confusing to me. We notice when they're going onto the Maw, half of them have masks, but we also notice that when they're all sitting down and eating, none of them do. I always wrote this off as they just took it off. They just took their masks off to eat, which I still believe, and I don't think that's a big detail. What I think is a big detail is we see guests sleeping, and the few times we see guests not eating, some of them are wearing masks. Like in the big chase scene, the big final chase scene where they're all coming out from behind their little cubbies, a lot of them are wearing masks. And in the room right before that, we see a guest asleep wearing a mask. Also, in the previous room, we see a chef chopping up a different sleeping guest. I believe that this distinction between masked guests and unmasked guests are very important with The Sounds of Nightmares episode 2. When recounting her dream, Noon describes seeing
plump men and women emerged, faces hidden behind wooden masks, bodies tucked away beneath mucky brown robes.
This sounds exactly like the guests, but this time she describes it as they all have masks. They are also described to be exiting from
giant fish-like contraptions crawled out from the waves, and from their mouths
is where the men and women emerged from. This sounds like a description of the Maw surfacing. From what we knew though, all of the guests are killed, so how could some be leaving? The masks. The guests we see board the Maw wearing masks are spared and the others are killed. No mammalian creature can eat its own body weight in one sitting, so that would mean a lot of the guests' bodies go to waste, as like one guest can't eat the entirety of another one guest, and even then those guests left over, what happens to them? The Maw doesn't need all these bodies, it doesn't need all that meat, so in theory, some guests can just leave. I believe that when a guest is invited to the Maw, some will be selected to get a mask. Those with masks are spared, and those without are killed. Those that are allowed to live are set free to go and cleanse themselves of their cannibalistic sins at the bathhouse. Think of the masks as a sort of symbol of power. It's a subtle way of showing that some guests are more powerful than others. Some get to leave, some don't. Think of it as the maskless guests are livestock to the masked guests. All of them go there to indulge, however, some of them are being used while others are the people in power that are using the kind of lower class. And that was the big implication that I wanted to talk about at the beginning of the episode, or that I brought up. I like the idea, and I think there's a big implication that even within the nowhere, even within, say, the guests specifically, there's a sort of class system where some are just more powerful than others. Yes, all guests are fat, which means, at least to an extent, with implications from the real world, they are able to eat a lot, which means that they have the ability to eat a lot, which implies that they could pay for the food to eat a lot and get fat, But I think the distinction of there being masks, of there being some hidden in plain sight kind of identification, that some guests are more powerful than others, some get to leave while some have to get killed, I think this is an interesting concept. And I think we've seen it kind of before. Or not before yet, because this idea shows up, I believe, in Little Nightmares 3. There's the difference between the factory workers and then the carnival attendants. These giant guest-like people show up at the carnival, this place of relaxation and entertainment, and you go and have fun and enjoy your life, while others, such as the factory workers, are forced to slave away, making candy for an unknown audience. Some people have thought that this candy goes directly to the carnival to be sold at the carnival, and I think this makes a lot of sense. And I think this theme goes along with what we see with the guests in the bathhouse. Some of the guests or factory workers are left behind, forced to work and slave away to kind of service the upper class that goes and entertains themselves at the carnival. Some residents are trapped in the factory, forced to slave away making candy for presumably the carnival. This shows an upper class of carnival people exploiting the lower class of factory workers, and I think this parallels what we see with the guests and the bathers. Some of the guests are killed as livestock to be fed to the upper class guests, and then those upper class guests they're allowed to leave. They're allowed to be set free and go clean themselves at the bathhouse. I think that there's a sort of class system within the guests, within the world of the nowhere itself. And whether that's not the case, whether I'm just pulling at straws here, I do think that would be a cool kind of idea to showcase in the world of Little Nightmares, and I think implementing it in that way would be a good way of kind of showing it, where all the people look the same, but there's just some inherent difference that we can't see, or the lack of an inherent difference. All the guests are the same, but just some get to leave and some don't. The reason why some of them get masks and some of them don't, that's not known, but I think it's a good way to kind of parallel real life, or be a good social commentary, if you will. Anyways, that's kind of my view. I think that the bathers are guests that are exiting the maw and that were allowed to be set free because of their masks. I think something about these special guests made them special enough to get a mask, which indicated to the chefs, indicated to the lady, whoever ends up killing the guests for meat, indicates to them that those guys should be allowed to be set free. Probably because they're rich, they're a different class, or maybe just for funsies. Maybe it's random selection, like a lottery. Either way, I think some guests are allowed to leave and they go on to become the bathers, and then other guests are forced to be killed and act as a sort of livestock for the masked guests. If you like this kind of theory, if you like this idea of there being a class system in the nowhere between guests, then like the video and subscribe. I think this was an interesting connection that I haven't seen anyone really make yet, and I wanted to call it out because I think the implications are interesting, and I think just the idea that some guests are allowed to leave and some not, and that's indicated through the strange masks that we see. I just think it's an interesting idea, and I want to see it kind of implemented into the game further, which I'm really hoping we see with the factory and carnival workers and all that stuff. Anyways, if you like the video, like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and look out for episode 2. Look out for the Sounds of Nightmares episode 2. I'm going to be working on it. I'm going to be posting progress. I'm going to be kind of just updating everyone as much as I can. And, that's all. Thank you for watching.